James Monroe. In the service of liberty, a boy became a patriot, and a patriot became a president. Learn English through historical stories about U.S. presidents. Improve English. The story consists of 3 parts. Part 1, Early Life and Rise to Power. Part 2, Presidency. Part 3, Legacy and Reflections. If you found this video meaningful, please support the channel by giving it a like, subscribing, sharing with your friends, and don't forget to leave a comment below. Every little action from you is a big motivation for me to keep creating more valuable and heartfelt videos. Thank you very much. Part 1. The Quiet Architect of Liberty. In the service of liberty, a boy became a patriot, and a patriot became a president. Chapter 1. Born of the soil. James Monroe was born on April 28, 1758, in the quiet rural expanse of Westmoreland County, Virginia, the same county that had already given the young nation 2 future presidents, George Washington and James Madison. His parents, Spence Monroe and Elizabeth Jones Monroe, were modest planters who instilled in their son a firm sense of duty, perseverance, and an unshakable value of hard work. The Monroes weren't aristocrats. They were rooted in the soil, shaped by seasons and storms. A life that would later resonate in Monroe's unpretentious, steady leadership. Monroe's early life was shaped by personal loss. His father died when James was just 16 years old. Despite the hardship, James was accepted into the College of William and Mary, where he began his formal education just as America was about to declare independence. Chapter 2. The Revolutionary Spirit in 1776, inspired by revolutionary ideals and the call for liberty, 18-year-old Monroe dropped out of college and joined the Continental Army. It was a moment of reckoning. A young man leaving books behind for muskets, driven by something greater than personal ambition. He served under General George Washington and took part in the Battle of Trenton, a pivotal moment in the Revolutionary War. As Monroe led a charge against Hessian forces, a musket ball struck him in the shoulder, nearly killing him. His wound was serious, but the memory would be etched into his identity forever. Monroe, the soldier who bled for the birth of a nation. Later, he served as an officer in the Army under General William Alexander, Lord Sterling, rising to the rank of major. His time in the military gave him more than medals. It gave him lifelong bonds, discipline, and credibility. He witnessed firsthand the sacrifices required for liberty and the price of leadership. Chapter 3. Law, Jefferson, and Enlightenment. After the war, Monroe studied law under Thomas Jefferson, then the governor of Virginia. Their relationship would evolve into a close friendship and ideological alliance that spanned decades. Jefferson, a man of enlightenment, thought, left an indelible mark on Monroe. He taught the young veteran not only law, but also philosophy, government, and diplomacy. Monroe absorbed Jeffersonian ideals of republicanism, limited government, agrarian virtue, and suspicion of centralized power, values that would guide him for life. It wasn't long before Monroe transitioned into politics. By 1782, he was elected to the Virginia House of Delegates, and a year later, to the Continental Congress. Even as a young man, he stood as a voice of unity, pushing for a stronger federal structure without sacrificing the liberty that had been so hard-won. Chapter 4. Diplomat and statesman in a new republic. In 1790, Monroe became a U.S. Senator from Virginia, quickly earning a reputation as a steady hand and a committed public servant. President George Washington appointed him as Minister to France in 1794. During the height of the French Revolution, a stormy, dangerous posting, Monroe sympathized with the revolutionaries but was caught in the turbulent politics of the time. Though his openness to French radicalism eventually led to his recall, Monroe had earned the gratitude of American citizens. Stranded in France, he saw diplomacy not just as political chess, but as human rescue. After returning to America, Monroe served multiple terms as governor of Virginia, showing a deep commitment to civil society, public education, and state reform. He was also appointed minister to Great Britain and special envoy to Spain, gaining experience on the international stage during some of the most volatile years in global politics. Chapter 5, the Virginia Dynasty and Cabinet Clout. By the time Jefferson became president, Monroe was a key member of what would be called the Virginia Dynasty, a period where Virginian statesmen dominated the White House. Monroe played a central role in the Louisiana Purchase negotiations, expanding American territory and Jeffersonian ideals westward. Under President James Madison, Monroe served first as Secretary of State and then simultaneously as Secretary of War during the War of Gulf, making him the only U.S. cabinet member to ever hold both posts concurrently. It was a chaotic time, as the White House itself was burned by British forces, but Monroe's decisive leadership helped hold the country together. By 1816, as the War of 1812 faded into memory and the Federalist Party crumbled, Monroe emerged as the natural successor to the presidency, an embodiment of unity, experience, and Jeffersonian virtue. Chapter 6, Character Above Politics. James Monroe was not a brilliant orator like Jefferson, nor a visionary like Hamilton, but what set him apart was his character, dependable, honest, unshakable in times of stress. He was a consensus builder, not a divider, a man who saw public service as sacred. He was often described as reserved but warm, with a modest demeanor that masked his political savvy. He lacked flamboyance but exuded reliability. In an age of ideological warfare between Federalists and Republicans, Monroe was a calming force. He believed in American exceptionalism, but not arrogance, unity, but not uniformity, peace, but never at the cost of principle. Chapter 7, A President in the Making. By the time Monroe campaigned for the presidency, he was a living symbol of American resilience. War hero, diplomat, legislator, and cabinet official. Few men in American history had such a rounded preparation. He campaigned on unity, promising to be a president for all Americans, not just one faction. The country responded with overwhelming support, and in 1816, Monroe was elected the 5th President of the United States in a landslide. The next chapter of his life would be defined not by battles on the field, but by diplomacy, doctrine, and the long shadow of a growing republic. Part 2, Presidency. He sought peace without complacency, unity without silence, and expansion without empire. Chapter 1. Inauguration and the borrowed promise of unity. James Monroe assumed the presidency on March 4, 1817, stepping into a fragile yet hopeful nation. The scars of the War of 1812 were still visible. Cities, burned banks, broken, and political trust frayed. But with those scars came a hunger for healing. Monroe's election marked a shift toward national restoration, and his presidency would soon earn his famous label, the era of good feelings. From the very beginning, Monroe embodied modesty and determination. At his inauguration, he wore simple attire and gave a speech focused on unity, infrastructure, and healing divisions. His calm voice did not electrify the crowd. but his sincerity did. Chapter 2. A President on the Move. Unlike any of his predecessors, Monroe became the first sitting president to travel extensively across the nation. He journeyed through the Northeast, the South, and even into what was then the western frontier. This was not merely symbolic. Monroe believed that the president must be seen, that physical presence could unify diverse states. Citizens who had only read about Washington or Jefferson could now shake the hand of the president themselves. Children lined up on dirt roads. Veterans saluted. Local leaders opened their homes. In a time before mass communication, Monroe's tours were bridges between people and power. He listened, took notes, and, most importantly, reminded Americans that they were one people. Chapter 3. Building a stronger nation domestically, Monroe's administration focused heavily on internal improvements. Roads, canals, and transportation systems to link the sprawling nation. Though wary of federal overreach, Monroe supported projects that promoted commerce and national unity. He backed the Cumberland Road extension and signed bills for canal systems that would become arteries of American trade. These efforts laid the groundwork for the nation's future economic explosion. He was influenced by Henry Clay's American system, though he didn't always agree with Clay's vision. Still, Monroe saw merit in infrastructure and education as tools for strengthening democracy. Chapter 4. Crisis and the Panic of 1890 yet. Prosperity did not come easy. In 1819, the nation plunged into its first major economic crisis. The Panic of 1819. Banks failed, credit vanished, farms were foreclosed, and citizens across the country faced bankruptcy. The nation, still young, had no blueprint for such a collapse. Monroe remained calm, refusing to take drastic executive actions, which would have been seen as federal overreach. Instead, he urged Congress to explore reforms and emphasized the need for sound banking and careful regulation. Though he was criticized for inaction, his steady hand helped prevent panic from turning into political chaos. Chapter 5. The Missouri Compromise and the Question of Slavery. Perhaps the most defining challenge of Monroe's presidency came in 1820. With the Missouri Compromise, Missouri applied for statehood as a slave state, which threatened to upset the delicate balance between free and slave states in Congress. The debate grew so intense that it threatened the very fabric of the Union. Monroe, though personally uncomfortable with slavery, was no abolitionist. He believed the federal government had limited power over slavery where it already existed. With the guidance of Henry Clay, a deal was reached. Missouri would enter as a slave state, Maine, formerly part of Massachusetts, as a free state, and slavery would be banned north of latitude 36°30 in future territories. Monroe signed the bill into law, reluctantly, but with the belief it would preserve the fragile Union. It was a temporary peace, one that would unravel decades later, but Monroe's calm mediation helped avoid a civil war in his own time. Chapter 6. The Monroe Doctrine. In 1823, Monroe made history with one of the most consequential foreign policy declarations in U.S. history, the Monroe Doctrine. Crafted with the help of Secretary of State John Quincy Adams, the doctrine warned European powers the Western Hemisphere was no longer open for colonization, and any attempt to interfere in the Americas would be seen as a threat to the United States. At a time when Latin American nations were declaring independence from Spain and Europe was eyeing expansion, Monroe's doctrine was bold. It marked a coming of age for U.S. diplomacy, a small republic standing tall among empires. Though America had limited power to enforce it then, the doctrine sent a clear message. This hemisphere belongs to its people, not to kings. Chapter 7. A nearly unanimous re-election. In 1820, Monroe ran for a second term virtually unopposed. He received all but one electoral vote, reportedly because one elector wanted to preserve George Washington's legacy of unanimous election. The vote wasn't just a political victory, it was a national endorsement of Monroe's style. Calm, dignified, measured. He had become a figure of unity in a time of division. His popularity was so great that he often didn't need to campaign at all. But beneath the surface, tensions were crowding. The economic scars of the panic remained. The slavery debate would return with more force. And the Republican Party, once unified, began to splinter. Chapter 8. Leadership, Style, and Cabinet. Strength. Monroe's greatest asset may have been his team. He assembled one of the strongest cabinets in U.S. history. John Quincy Adams as Secretary of State, a brilliant mind. Adams helped shape the Monroe Doctrine and negotiated key treaties. John C. Calhoun as Secretary of War, ambitious and sharp. Calhoun helped modernize the military. William Crawford, as Treasury Secretary, managed economic policies during a period of instability. Monroe's leadership style was non-confrontational, yet firm. He listened, built consensus, and let his cabinet shine. Unlike some leaders who hoarded power, Monroe delegated. His humility wasn't weakness, it was strength. Chapter 9. Expanding the Nation. Monroe's presidency also saw significant territorial expansion. In 1819, under the Adams-Onis Treaty, the U.S. acquired Florida from Spain. The deal also set a clear western boundary with New Spain, now Mexico, preventing future conflicts and strengthening America's southern flank. Monroe also supported westward migration and worked to improve relations with Native American tribes, though most of his policies, like many of his era, ultimately displaced indigenous people from their lands. He believed in manifest destiny before the term existed, envisioning a nation that spanned the continent but never as a conqueror. For Monroe, expansion was about access and unity, not dominion. Chapter 10. Farewell and reflection. As Monroe's second term neared its end, he chose not to seek a third. He believed in the two-term tradition set by Washington and quietly prepared to return to private life. He left office in 1825, turning over the presidency to John Quincy Adams, his former Secretary of State. By the time he departed, the nation had changed. It was bigger, more confident, and, thanks in part to Monroe's leadership, more united than ever before. His farewell tour was met with celebration. Towns rang bells, schoolchildren sang songs, and veterans of Trenton embraced the man who had bled with them so long ago. Part 3. Legacy and Reflections. He left no empire, only ideas. No crown, only a creed. Chapter 1. After the White House. When James Monroe left the presidency in 1825, he did so with little fanfare. True to form, he walked away from power not with ceremony, but with quiet dignity. The nation he left behind was stronger than the one he had inherited, more secure, more united, and more confident in its place on the world stage. He returned to his home in Oak Hill, Virginia, with his wife Elizabeth Courtwright Monroe, where he hoped to live out his remaining years in peace. But Monroe was never truly retired. He remained mentally active, corresponding with friends, advising younger politicians, and offering insight when asked. He did not write memoirs. He did not tour the country. He did not seek to reshape the political narrative. Monroe was content to let his actions speak for themselves. Chapter 2. Loss and Hardship. Life after the presidency was not easy. Monroe had spent much of his personal wealth on public duties, financing diplomatic trips, entertaining dignitaries, and keeping up appearances expected of a president in the early republic. Without a pension system for former presidents, he faced financial hardship, forcing him to sell land and seek reimbursement from Congress. It was a painful irony. The man who had expanded the U.S. and guarded its peace now struggled to pay his bills. Tragedy compounded his hardship. In 1830, his wife, Elizabeth, passed away. The two had shared a lifelong bond that began in New York and spanned wars, foreign postings, and the White House. Her death devastated Monroe, who by then was frail and deeply lonely. Chapter 3. A quiet death in a busy city. After Elizabeth's death, Monroe left Oak Hill and moved to New York City to live with his daughter, Maria Hester Monroe, governor, and her family. His health declined rapidly. He suffered from heart failure and the emotional toll of loneliness and disconnection from Virginia, the land he had loved so deeply. On July 4th, 1831, Monroe died at the age of 73. In a remarkable coincidence, he became the third president to die on Independence Day, following Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, both of whom died exactly 5 years earlier, in 1826. It was as if Providence had scripted the final curtain, 3 founding fathers dying on the birthday of the nation they helped create. Chapter 4. The Last Founding. Father Monroe was the last of the founding fathers to serve as president. His passing marked the end of an era, one that began with rebellion and ended with republic. While Jefferson and Hamilton wrote volumes and Washington etched his legend through action, Monroe's greatness lay in something simpler: balance. He was never extreme, never erratic, and rarely ideological. It's a shadow that reminds us that even the most brilliant minds can fall short of their ideals, and that liberty to endure must be consistent and universal. He sought consensus, compromise, and country above all. He never sought fame, but he earned reverence. To historians, Monroe became known as the President of Peace, the architect of unity, and the reluctant hero. His contributions were broad but subtle. The Missouri Compromise, the Monroe Doctrine, the acquisition of Florida, and the quiet support of national infrastructure. He was a builder, not a destroyer. Chapter 5. The Enduring Monroe Doctrine. Of all Monroe's policies, none would shape American foreign relations as profoundly as the Monroe Doctrine, declared in 1823. Originally designed to protect Latin American nations from European interference, the doctrine evolved into a cornerstone of American policy. It was invoked by presidents for over a century, influencing decisions in the Caribbean, South America, and beyond. Though critics would later use it to justify interventionism, its original spirit was defensive, a shield, not a sword. Monroe wanted the Western Hemisphere to be free, not just from kings, but from future wars of empire. In that doctrine, Monroe etched the soul of American independence into foreign policy. Chapter 6. Philosophy and Personality. What kind of man was James Monroe? He was not flamboyant, nor a great public speaker. He lacked the philosophical writings of Jefferson or the confrontational brilliance of Adams. But Monroe's strength was in character, calm, measured, honest, and deeply principled. He believed in the Republic, not as a concept, but as a way of life. He lived it, served it, endured for it. He sacrificed wealth and comfort for the promise of a government by the people. He was reserved in public, affectionate in private. Letters from his wife reveal the marriage of genuine love, while correspondences with friends show warmth, humility, and wit. To those who knew him, Monroe was both unimposing and unforgettable. Chapter 7. Legacy in the American Imagination. In the decades after his death, Monroe's reputation dimmed, not because he failed, but because he lacked the drama that history books tend to crave. He was not part of the Civil War, not tied to abolition or rebellion. He was the calm before the storm. But as historians reevaluated the founding generation, Monroe's star began to rise. He was seen as the steadying figure who helped transition the U.S. from revolution to permanence. Cities, counties, universities, and parks bear his name. Monroe, Michigan, Monroe County, in dozens of states, and James Monroe University in Virginia. In 1858, his remains were moved from New York to the Hollywood Cemetery in Richmond, where they rest under an ornate Gothic-style tomb, known as the Governor's Circle. He is buried near John Tyler, another Virginian president. Chapter 8. Lessons from Monroe. Monroe's life offers enduring lessons. That leadership doesn't require noise, only purpose. That unity is not weakness, but the hardest, strength to maintain. That expansion, when guided by principle, can uplift rather than conquer. That public service is noble, even when it costs you personally. And that a peaceful legacy, though quiet, often lasts the longest. In modern America, riven with partisanship and hyperbole, Monroe's calm approach feels almost revolutionary. He governed without Twitter, without a party machine, without ego, just commitment. Chapter 9. The final thought: history has room for revolutionaries and reformers, for speakers and soldiers. James Monroe was not the loudest, the richest, or the most radical, but he was among the most steady. He built bridges where others built battlegrounds. He stitched together a fraying republic. He faced storms, economic, political, moral, and stayed at the helm. And when it was time, he left quietly, letting the ship sail forward. Today, Monroe reminds us that greatness is not always found in noise or glory, but in the gentle echo of a leader who simply did the job and did it well. If you found this video meaningful, please support the channel by giving it a like, subscribing, sharing with your friends, and don't forget to leave a comment below. Every little action from you is a big motivation for me to keep creating more valuable and heartfelt videos. Thank you very much.